Alright, welcome back everyone. My name is Dustin, and in the last video we added the mouse class to the input manager and we got it also working in Lua. If you missed that video, you can check that out right here. And if you missed the first input management video, you should check that out first and you can see that one right here. Okay, so in this video we're going to start adding in the gamepad to the input manager. But the gamepad is a little bit more complicated than the keyboard and the mouse. Let's take a little look at this diagram here. So this is your typical Xbox style controller. Not all controllers are going to have hat values. Like the PS4 controller won't have a hat value, but they will have 6 axes. Your right stick, up and down, left stick, your right trigger and your left trigger. Those are also axes that have an analog value. And then the buttons, you're going to have your A, B, X, Y, etc. All your different buttons. And then your different hat values. The hat values allow you to have 360 degrees of motion. Not all controllers have this. I do know that the one computer Logitech controller I have does implement this, which is great, and we'll go over that in this video. Okay, so just like the mouse and the keyboard, we need to create some constants for the gamepad buttons. So let's do that now. So we'll go to our inputs, add new, header file, and we'll call this gp buttons.h. So I already have these queued up over here, so I'm just going to copy them over so I don't have to type them all out. Alright, and we'll just go over them really fast. So these are the gamepad button definitions. They're based on the Xbox style controller. We're going to have our unknown value like always, but then you have these values here. And I've tested these values to make sure that's what they were. You may have to do that for you. Your controller's buttons may not be the same, but this is what you have to do. And then we also have our hat values. And then these are the values that I got for my particular controller. We don't need this. Get rid of that. Alright, so now that we have our gamepad constants, it's time to start the gamepad class. So let's get into that now. Alright, so inputs, new, gamepad. Gamepad.h. So the gamepad will have our gamepad buttons, so let's include our buttons. Gamepad buttons, and it will also have button. Gamepads have buttons. And we're also going to need to include our Scion utilities, SDL wrappers. We're going to need that for the controller. If we go back here, let's actually make sure that it's done. Yeah, so here we need to make shared controller. We need this type def that we made because I want this nice beautiful wrapper to close the controller for us automatically. Let's see if we actually filled this out. I don't know if we did. No, we didn't fill these out yet. We can actually, let's put this in the other one. Get rid of that. So we need to fill this out for our game controller. This is our custom deleter, and we're going to want to go SDL game controller close and send in the controller. And we can just set the controller to null pointer. I don't think that matters, but we'll do it anyway, and just say SDL or STD cout closed SDL game controller. I'm only putting this here so we know that it actually worked for us. Okay, cool. And then we need to do the make shared. So we're going to be using that in the input manager. So let's go back to SDL wrappers here and let's do this make shared for the controller. And that's just we're returning the STD shared pointer of a SDL game controller. And then we send in the controller. Then we also do the Scion util STL destroyer like that, and it's controller. Cool. And we want to return the shared pointer. All right, cool. So there's our make shared. This will wrap our SDL game controller pointer for us. All right, let's go back into gamepad and continue going. So we're going to need a map for our buttons. So include map, and we also can have a string for the name. Whoops, string. Because each gamepad is going to have a name, and we're going to put this in our namespace. Namespace Scion windowing inputs, and we're going to say class gamepad, and we're going to have some private and some public like always. Okay, so the first thing we need is a controller, and the controller is going to be, we type def this in our utilities, and that is a shared pointer to an SDL game controller. MP controller, or you call it gamepad, And then we need to map up our buttons. std map int button and map buttons, just like the mouse and keyboard. And we're also going to want to have our instance ID for the joystick, because we're going to need to check against it sometimes to make sure that we're using the right one. And that's just going to be our instance ID, or you can call it joystick ID, that's fine. And we're also going to need another map. We're going to need the axis values, because if we go back to this picture here, we have 6 axes, and these are analog values from between negative 32,000 to positive 32,000. So we need to hold those values somehow. And we'll do that with a map as well. So it'll be std map, and it's uint 8, not 7, 8, and sint 16s. That's the SDL values that are being used, and map axis values. Cool. And then we need to have the hat value. The hat is just a simple value between 0 and 16 or 15. Yeah, 0 and 15 would be it. So we can just use a uint 8 m joystick hat value. Now, not all controllers have hats. We've talked about that before. And then we have std string ms name. Now we can also, when we load the controller, we can find out the number of axes and stuff like that, so we can do our map in a much better way. However, we're just going to do 6 axes, because I know that the 2 controllers that I use both have 6 axes with them. If you want, you can add it in for number of axes that are actually there and the number of buttons, and you can hold on to that in the controller. So that's our variables, that's what we have there. So let's go gamepad for our constructor, and our constructor is going to take in a controller. Okay, and we're also just going to say our gamepad destructor can just be default, because we don't have to delete anything, because we're using our custom deleter here. It should automatically close itself, and we'll test that inside to make sure that it's actually happening. So just like our keyboards and mouse, we need our update. We need our on button pressed. So void on button pressed. And that'll take in a button. On button released. And is button pressed, is button just pressed, is button just released. And that's bool, that's const bool, is button pressed, takes in the button. This will also be const, is button just pressed, is button just released. Cool, we got that in there. We're also gonna have one that, is the gamepad even present? Like, is it plugged in? So we'll just say const bool is gamepad present. That will also be const. So since we have our 6 axes, we need to have a way to get and set those values. So we want to go const sint 16 get axis position or value. So what's the position of the axis? uint 8 uint 8 sorry, axis. And then we also want to be able to set that value. So void set axis position value. And that's going to take in our uint 8 axis. So which axes are we setting the value to, and the value that we're setting it to. Okay, there's our axes. So like I said before, the hat values that we're going to set now basically give you 360 degrees of motion, kind of like a flight joystick. You can easily use these values to do angular motion and your up, down, your left, right, without using the multiple D-pad buttons. So we can go, and this is just a simple value, inline void, set joystick hat value. That takes in uint 8 value. And we're going to set the value here. I keep doing that. uint8. Then it's m. Joystick hat value is equal to value. Awesome. And then we also want to be able to get that value. So we go inline, const, uint8, get joystick hat value. Now you can change that to just to get hat value, but return m joystick hat value. Awesome. We also need a way to ensure that we're using the correct gamepad. So we need to check its actual instance ID that was assigned from SDL to the one that's being sent in. So this is going to be used within the input manager. You'll see it when we get there. So let's go inline, const, wool, check, joystick ID. And I'll take in an SDL joystick ID, and we'll call that joystick ID. And we'll return, and this can be const, and we'll return is our instance ID equal to the joystick ID. Not equal, equals. Cool. And we also need a way to get the name. So let's go const std string reference get name. Now we don't need the name right now, but we will be using it in the editor later on. So ms name. Cool. All right, so let's create all these functions. Awesome. Let's go to gamepad.cpp, do our little namespace. Get rid of these. All right, so we might as well add in our logger because we're probably going to be using it. So let's go logger, logger.h. And here, let's initialize our controller. Controller std move controller. And then we have to do our map. So our map of buttons, map buttons. And that is Scion GP button A. A, B, X, Y. Back, guide, and start. Back. Guide. Sorry, start. Then we have left stick, right stick. Left stick. Right stick. Now the left stick, right stick, if you push those buttons in, there's actually a button in there as well, along with the analog values. Left shoulder, right shoulder. Whoops. Left shoulder. Right shoulder. And our D-pads. D-pad up. D-pad up. Down, left, right. Down, left, right. Awesome. I believe that's all of them, so we'll just leave it like that. And we'll start our instance ID as -1. Now we want to start it as -1 because 0 is a valid instance. and map axes values. Okay. So with this one, we're going to just automatically assume there's 6. However, you may want to check and load these values based on the number of axes you have. So we're just going to assume there's 6. So it'll be 0, 0. And we'll just copy this. 1. And these are the axes values. So it's axis 1, axis 2, axis 3. 4 and 5. 4 and 5. Now, if you have more or less, you're going to have to accommodate for that, but we're not going to do that right now. And then we just have to set our hat value. So our M joystick hat value, we're just going to set that to the Scion hat centered, sorry. Cool. There we go with those. I believe we got them all. Good. So in order to get some of the values, we need to query our SDL game controller joystick to get the number of axes, hats, buttons, and name, all these things. That's what we need to do. So what we have to do is go SDL joystick. Now we're just going to get a pointer to the joystick. Pointer joystick is equal to SDL game controller get joystick. And we have to send in a game controller pointer. So we go MP controller get. And here we're going to just check to see if not MP controller or not joystick. We're actually going to throw here. Throw controller or joystick or null pointer. Or you can say not open correctly. Awesome. So let's set our instance ID. And instance ID is equal to SDL joystick instance ID. Joystick instance ID. And that takes in the joystick. And let's get the name. So ms name is equal to std string SDL joystick name. Joystick name. And that also takes in the joystick. Cool. Right now we're gonna get the num axes, num balls, num hats, num buttons from the joystick just to see what we have. If you want, you can actually hold on to these values, just create variables to hold on to these values. So we can just go auto num axes is equal to SDL joystick num axes, joystick num or axis, sorry. And that takes in the joystick. Then there's num balls, and num hats, and num buttons. And we'll change these over here. Whoops. Buttons, hats, and balls. All right, cool. And let's just log those to the screen. Gamepad name. And we'll just say ms name. Let's get the instance ID. And we'll just call this ID. Num axes. Num balls. Call that balls as well. Now you don't have to do this. This is just so we can see what our controllers have. Num hats. And num buttons. All right. So now we have to do our update, and it's the same as the other ones. We're just resetting the states of the buttons. Okay, so we go for auto reference button in map buttons, we just want to go button.reset, button.reset. Cool. That's it for that one. And just like our mouse, our keyboard, we're going to want to check to see if our button is equal to Scion GP button unknown. And if that is, we're just going to have an error. Gamepad button is unknown. And that takes in the button. And we're just going to return. Okay. Then we go auto button iter is equal to map buttons. Does this button exist? Basically, we want to find it and check to see if it's there. Exactly the same as the other ones. Copy this. Gamepad button does not exist. And if it does exist, we want to go button iter, second, update, true. Awesome. All right. So we can copy everything in here into our release. It's the same idea, and this is false for release. Exactly the same as the mouse and the keyboard. Paste this in. This is going to be false. False. Now, and this one is going to be returning. Return button second B is pressed. And we'll copy this one now. Just pressed. And just released. Awesome. There's the easy ones done. So now gamepad is present is pretty straightforward as well. We're just going to check to see if the gamepad is null pointer and that we actually have more than 0 num joysticks. So MP controller is not equal to null pointer, and SDL num joysticks is greater than 0. Cool, there's that one. And get axis position. Okay, so we basically want to do the same idea as above. We want to check to see if the axis that we're sending in exists, and if it exists, we want to return the value at that axis. So we go auto axis iter is equal to map axis values dot find axis if axis iter is equal to map axis values dot end. We're going to want to return. So we'll go Scion error axis does not exist. And we're just going to return 0 here. Or we could return -1. 0 will do. And if it does exist, we want to return axis iter second. And that's just the value for us. Awesome. And with a set one, we can take this here. It's basically the same thing. We're not returning anything. And we're actually just setting it to the value. Awesome. So that's the controller. So we're halfway done. Now we have to go into the input manager and add this in. So let's go there now. All right, so now that we're in the input manager, we want to add in our gamepad. So we have axis, gamepad. And like I said before, we want to be able to accommodate up to 4 controllers. So first thing, let's make a quick little constant, and we'll call const expr int max controllers is equal to 4. Cool. Because we don't want to have more than 4 controllers. We want to be able to accommodate 4 controllers. So here, instead of just having one controller, we're going to have a map of controllers. std map int std shared pointer of gamepads. I know I've been saying controllers, but I meant gamepads, sorry. And we're going to call it map of game controllers. All right. We're going to want to have a few functions as well. We're going to want to be able to get all the controllers at once. So that will just return the map. Map share pointers, and that's just get controllers. And that'll just return the controllers. Okay. Game controller, sorry. All right, and we're gonna have a few functions here. We're gonna wanna be able to add the gamepad, remove the gamepad, check if the gamepad button is pressed, check if it's released, get the axis values, and update the axis values, and update the hat values, and stuff like that. So the first thing we're gonna write here is add gamepad. That'll be Scion2D gamepad index, or should that be ID? That's okay. Void remove gamepad. And that will be Scion2D gamepad ID. Whoops. Then we want to say void gamepad button pressed. And that's going to actually take in an SDL event. I found it easier to just send in the event here. And then void gamepad button released. Also takes in an SDL event. Gamepad axis values. And gamepad hat values. And we also want to be able to update the gamepads. So void update gamepads. So that will loop through and update all the gamepads that we have. Okay, so let's create all of these. Okay, so the first one that we have is the add gamepad, and we're going to want to check to see if our map of game controllers is already at max. If it's greater than or equal to max, we don't want to add anymore. We just want to leave. So if we go if m map game controllers size is greater than or equal to max controllers, and we're just going to leave here. So Scion, I'll put an error in. And trying to add too many controllers. Max controllers allowed is equal to max controllers. Cool. And return false. It's saying that that is not there. So we must not have the logger in. Nope, we do not. So let's include our logger. Logger.h. Cool. And we'll go back down there. It's not return false, it's just return, sorry. Okay. Let's start with a STD shared pointer of a gamepad. And we'll start that off as null pointer. Okay. And we're going to want to put a try catch block here. And this will just catch the ellipsis. And we'll say gamepad is equal to std make shared gamepad and that's going to be std move make shared controller. It's not seeing the make shared controller, and that's because we have to add in our utilities. So go up here, include Scion. Oh, looks like we don't have our utilities here, so we need to include that in. So let's go up to our core, because that's where our input manager is, and go to our properties, BCC directories, add in our utilities. Cool. Apply. And we also want to add that as a reference. Here, add reference. And add our utilities. Cool. We should be able to see that now. So include Scion utilities, and we want our wrappers. Okay, go back down here, make shared, and we want to say SDL game controller open, and we want to send in the index, gamepad index. Cool. There we go. And if it doesn't work, we want to get the error from SDL, std string, error, SDL, get error. And we want to say Scion, error, fail to open gamepad device, send in the error. And return false. Or add gamepad, I actually wanted this to be a bool value, false. Sorry. Let's go back. Add and remove, these are both going to be bools. Cool. And let's go back into input manager. Change this. Bool. Awesome. All right, so if we make it to here, we know that our gamepad is good, and we're gonna want to loop through our maps, our map of controllers, and find an open slot. We wanna find the first open slot and put the gamepad in there, okay? So we'll go for int I is equal to 1, because I want to start it at 1. I is less than or equal to max controllers. I plus plus, and if map of game controllers dot contains, we want to see if it contains I. We're just going to continue. We're going to move to the next one. Else, we're going to go m map game controllers dot in place I std move the gamepad. Cool, and then we just go Scion log gamepad was added at index and we can return true. And if it makes it to here, that means that it was full. And we're just going to put a little assert in here first. We're just going to say false, failed to add the new controller. And in release, that assert will be ignored. So let's go error and say failed to add the new controller and return false. Awesome. Okay, so remove gamepad. What we want to do here is loop through the game controllers and check our ID. So that's what we were using to check joystick ID. So we'll be sending in the gamepad to be removed and we'll close it from there. So we go for const auto reference index gamepad and map game controllers. So we go if, because this is a shared pointer, we'll say if gamepad and gamepad.check joystick ID is equal to the gamepad ID being sent in. We want to erase that, so we go m map game controllers erase, not in place, erase index and Scion log gamepad removed. Gamepad ID index gamepad ID. Cool. And then return true. And then another one, if we don't make it, if it fails to remove the gamepad, like we shouldn't be calling this, we're going to want to assert fail to remove the controller. We could say gamepad must not have been mapped. And this one we'll put in the ID. And return false. Alright guys, so at the end of the video when we're testing the values in Lua, we're actually getting some weird numbers for the index value, and that's because we're trying to use the value after erasing it from the map. So that's the problem that we have here, so we're going to have to change this real fast. So we'll do that right now. So what happened is when you erase from the map, any iterators that are created for you become invalidated. So this here is actually undefined behavior because it doesn't exist any longer. So what we're going to do now is actually have a change for that. So let's just erase all of this. We can keep this assert here, that's fine. Gamepad must not have been mapped. This should say failed to remove. Let's say failed to remove gamepad. This as well, failed to remove. Cool. So what we need to do now is actually change how we do it, and we're going to go auto gamepad removed. Okay, it's equal to std erase if. So std erase if will return the number of elements that were erased from the map. So we're going to send in the map game controllers, and then we need to send in a lambda function, and that's going to be lambda, and it's going to go capture by reference, and it's going to say auto reference gamepad. So what this is going to do is give us a pair from the map, and here we're going to go, we're going to go return gamepad.second check joystick ID, and send in the gamepad ID. Okay, so what this will do is it'll loop through the map and find the one that has true, and it'll return the one, how many that it actually erased from the map for us. So it'll give us the number that it erased. So we need to check to see how many were erased. So we go if gamepad removed, removed is greater than 0. Then we're going to just log Scion log gamepad removed, and we'll just say the ID, gamepad ID, and then return true. And if this isn't greater than 0, or it'll come and it'll fail here. It'll say, hey, this has not been mapped, unable to remove it. Cool, and that should work for us now. So I'm gonna run it. All right, so at the end of the video, we write some Lua stuff that allows us to actually control the gamepad and do some different things. But this here is just the info. Every time we create a gamepad, we have our info. So what was happening is when we were unhooking the gamepad here, it would give us an error that says index, gamepad removed, index is like -5 million, blah, blah, blah. So that was incorrect. We didn't want that. So this is fixed now and it should work correctly. If you see it says close SDL game controller, that's exactly what we want. And that means our custom deleter is actually being called. All right, so that's a fix for that. Please enjoy the rest of the video. All right, just a few more functions here to go. And this one, we're gonna wanna loop through the controllers to see if we have the ID. So we're setting in the event, and we wanna know which ID or which controller it's actually triggering right now. So we go for const auto reference index gamepad map game controllers, and if gamepad and gamepad check joystick ID. And this one we're setting in the event dot JADE-ite dot which. So which one are we sending in? And if it is, we want to go gamepad on button pressed event dot C button or controller button dot button, and we'll break. No need to keep looping. Same with the release, we can just copy this on released. All right, just a couple more. So we can basically keep that copy and paste it in because we want to check the device anyway. And then we want to say here, we're setting the access value. So set access position values. And we're going to want to take here, get rid of this. We still need the event, but we'll go event dot jaccess dot axis. So which axis is it? And then the value of that axis. Jaccess dot value. Awesome. And one more, well then the update, but that's pretty straightforward. You guys could figure that one out for sure. Paste this in here, and this is our set hat values. So which device, and then it's the same idea, so event dot jhat dot value. Awesome. Okay, and then our update gamepads, just loop through your gamepads, see if that is a valid pointer. And then update it. Awesome. All right, so we're 3/4 of the way through. Hopefully you guys are following along and catching it. If I'm making any mistakes, hopefully we find it fast. So now we actually want to add it in here. Okay, so now we have to add our bindings in for our gamepads. And the gamepad is a little bit different because we want to send it in what index, like which gamepad we're actually trying to use right here. So we go lua.new user type, and that's gamepad. If you want, give it a shot, see if you can figure this out. We need to send in basically the same as the other ones with the just press, but you have to send in your index as well, and then you have to do your other functions. So give it a pause here and try it yourself. Okay, hopefully you gave that a shot, and we're gonna do it now. So gamepad, and go sol no constructor. Oops. no constructor. And we're gonna say just pressed. It's gonna be a lambda capture, and we're gonna want the index, and we're gonna want the button. Okay, so here we're gonna go auto gamepad is equal to input manager dot get controller. Oh, we only have get controllers. Let's have one where we can just get the controller and send in the index. Let's make that now. So let's go to input manager. Sorry, I forgot to add this. So we go std shared pointer of gamepad, and we want to say get controller. And I'll take in an index. Make this cool. So it's the same like all the rest. We want to check to see if that gamepad iterator is there. So we go auto gamepad iter is equal to m map gamepad controllers, find the index going in, and then see if gamepad iter is equal to m map game controllers dot end. Well, we're gonna want to fail. So Scion error failed to get gamepad at index does not exist. And we return null pointer here. And if not, we return gamepad iter second. Sorry. Cool. And let's go back up to here. So we're getting our controller. Now we do want to check to see if this is null pointer. So we go if not gamepad, then Scion error invalid gamepad index provided, or gamepad is not plugged in. Send the index, and we'll just return false. Cool. And if we have it, we want to go return gamepad is button just pressed. Cool. And let's put a comma here and copy all of this, paste, and just change it to just released. Just released. Paste again. Oh, I don't want to paste that, but I want all of this. Paste. And this one is pressed. Is pressed. Awesome. Now we have another one, and it's get axis position. So we can just paste this in here as well, and we can go get axis position, or you can say get axis value, and we're sending in our index and our axis. Which axis do we want? And this is get axis position. And this is not returning false. We want to return 0. Cool. And we can copy this one. Paste. And this is get hat value. Get hat value. at the index. We only have to send in the index for this one. Get hat, joystick hat value. And this one is uint 8. All right. And that's pretty good for now. We can add the other ones in later, like the is valid and stuff like that. But this video is already going on pretty long. How long are we at? We are at an hour. So with editing, hopefully I can make it a bit smaller, but we're 85% of the way done. So let's continue on. One thing else that I forgot is we actually want to register our buttons. So we want to go static void register gamepad button names sol state reference. Cool. So the same thing, copy this in, and we want to go lua.set, and lua.set button A. You can call it gamepad button A, but I'm just going to call it button A for now. And that is Scion GP button A. Actually, I will do gamepad button A. Cool. B X Y. B X Y. B X Y. This one is button back. Guide. Start. You can name these whatever you want as well. Start. Then we're going to have our left stick, right stick. Yeah, we'll just say GP left stick. Right stick. Left shoulder. Right shoulder. And then we have our D-pads. We know the D-pad is our controller. D-pad up. Down, left, right. Down. Left. Right. Right. Left. Down. All right. And feel free to add in your hat positions and your axes if you like. Actually, you know what? We can just do those real fast as well. So we go lua.set axis x1 0 y1 is 1 y2 3 x2, and then we'll have our z axes, so z1. Z1 is your bottom triggers on the controller, and that's 4 and 5. And Z2. And that's good for now. You can add the hats in if you like. Cool. And we don't want to forget to call that. So register gamepad button names. Lua. All right. Okay, so we're almost done. So now all we need to do is go to the application and add it in. At least I hope that's all we have to do. Okay, so let's go do that now. So application up here, So let's add in our gamepad. We probably don't have to do this, but let's add it in. Gamepad, bring it down, go to our process events. Okay, so in process events, we have a few more that we have to add in. So we're gonna have to add in case, SDL, controller button down, controller button up, controller device added, device removed. Then we have SDL joy axis motion and joy hat motion. Cool. We have to start adding those in. And this one, we don't have to get the gamepads here. This is where we do the input manager itself. Input manager dot gamepad button pressed. And we're just sending in the event. And event, and that will all be handled inside of the input manager. Okay. Button up, so this would be released. Device added. We want to go to add gamepad. And then this one we're actually sending in the event dot JADE-ite dot which. So which one is being added right now and removed. So remove gamepad, event JADE-ite which device is being removed right now. And the axis motion, we want to say gamepad axis values, and that just takes in event. And hat motion, gamepad hat values. Awesome. And then one more thing down here, we want to go in our update function, input manager dot update gamepads. Cool. All right, let's build and see if it works. Awesome, and it built, so it still has our mouse stuff from before. That's great. So we're one step ahead. So let's go to our main.lua and test it out. So we already know that this works, the mouse works, keyboard works, we know that. So let's get rid of that for now. Let's do some stuff with our joysticks, or our gamepads, sorry. So we'll go local. Actually, let's just start here and let me just run this because we're flying through. Let's see. Yeah, see right here. So I've got the one gamepad in right now. So it loaded it perfectly. It is a gamepad F310. Its ID is 0. It has 6 axes, 0 balls, 1 hat, 11 buttons, and it was added at this index. So I actually have another controller here that I want to plug in. This is a PS4 controller, so let's plug that in now. Bang, it automatically saw it and added it for us. It's a PS4 controller, and it added in at a different index. And if we pull it out, it removed it for us. And you see here, it goes closed gamepad SDL game controller. That is our custom deleter being called. That's exactly what we wanted to see. And if I pull this one out, cool. So it looks like we're sending in something incorrect here, so we're going to have to figure that out, and that's fine. So let's just put our one gamepad in for now, and it should load it back up for us. Plug it back in. Cool. So it ends up with a different ID, but that's fine. Let's just close that, and let's add some stuff in. So we'll go local, R stick, so right stick, and we'll say left right is equal to gamepad dot get axis position, and we'll say controller number 1, and that is, let's just say 2 for now because I can't remember what my values were, and we'll say print R stick left right value R stick, sorry, left right, and we'll copy this, and we'll get the R stick up down, that's 3, up, down, paste this, and do the same for left stick. Actually, we can just copy both of these. But we have to change our axes value because they're different axes. That's 0 and 1. And let's get our triggers as well. And we just paste that in. And we'll just say left trigger. Axis 4 is our left trigger. L trigger. And let's say R trigger, and that's number 5. R trigger. Whoops. R trigger, this has to be a left trigger. R trigger. Cool, let's run this and see if it works. So print. And we got some errors coming here. So global L trigger, because I probably, yeah, that should be L trigger. Cool. That was a good error. All right, so we have the values. Awesome. So this is my right or left stick. And if I go up slowly, it goes into the negatives, go down, it goes into the positives. You can see these are analog values. I'm moving right and left. And you see there's like a little dead zone. You'd have to set that value. The 128, like you could set it to like start. Don't start moving till you hit like 1,000 or 2,000. You're gonna have different dead values. And here's our right trigger, or our right stick, sorry. And here's our triggers. Awesome, triggers work. All the analog values are working. So if these values are working, all the rest of the controllers most likely working as well. Give it a try, mess it around, try to move the player with the gamepad now. So that's it for this video. Please give a like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them below and I'll make sure to get back to you. All right, take it easy.